Hello and welcome to another episode of Trojan Dash, your show for everything USC football on Dash Sports TV. I'm joined once again by Nathan Ackerman. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I think your tone kind of gives it away. But I've been thinking about this game a lot because there's not much else I can think about after whatever in the world that was. And I was thinking it was basically week one. Like it was pretty much the same game, except it wasn't fun. Like the first game, it was kind of fun because they came back late and they were playing a good opponent, and it was their first game, so I gave them somewhat of a pass. But this game just wasn't fun. Like when they scored that go-ahead touchdown that ultimately won the game, I went from like really mad to like I don't know, slightly less mad, but it was just I don't know. I didn't have a good time watching that game.
In case you missed the game yesterday, USC pulled off, I guess, another late comeback against a team that they probably should have beaten by a lot more. They beat the Arizona Wildcats 34-30 in Tucson. Um, heck of a game. Heck of a game. What we didn't think was going to happen. I thought that game was going to be a blowout. Thought USC
Yeah,
was going to get their feet under themselves. They started off slow. They always start off slow, especially against when they're playing a team like Arizona State. They always struggle against them for some reason. And I thought they were going to finally kick things into gear. You had a new defensive staff. But the other interesting thing is, so did Arizona. They had four new coaches on defense. So did USC. So
mhm.
it God, and USC's defense looked a lot worse than Arizona's did. But let's get
Yeah,
into the good. I want to talk about the happy things from this game because there are a few things we can take away. We'll get into all the
you.
negative. But let's start with the good right now. So I'm going to let you start. What do you take away from this game that says, hey, there's still something to watch out for?
Yeah. So we were talking about this a couple minutes ago, and I don't know if you're quite as sold as I am, but to me, the receiving group has been basically as good as advertised. Now, I understand that, it hasn't been putting up the insane numbers that we thought that it might. But the first game, you had two guys, Amon Ra and Drake London, at or above 100 yards. And then in the second game, you had Amon Ra with 105 yards in the second half alone. He was a big part of USC's offensive turnaround. Tyler Vaughn's put up 70, I think, and then London with like 45, which played a nice complementary role in that offense. And I thought I didn't think USC wins that game without what Amon-Ra St. Brown did in the second half, especially. I think one of the more underrated plays was that 46-yard completion to open up the second drive of the third quarter, because that opened up the run game. You saw Carr and Stepp start off the next couple drives with like 46, 37, something like that yard run. So I thought that was big. And especially considering what they've done with Akeem Slovis, who has been good, but doesn't quite look like himself, and certainly hasn't quite looked like himself in the first two. That's been a positive sign. And the other thing kind of coming off of that is that I guess this team is clutch. And I didn't anticipate finding out whether or not this team was clutch, especially in week two, because I didn't think they were going to be in any clutch situations for obvious reasons. But I was sort of thinking both of these first two games, each of them had two late offensive drives by SC where if they're not all touchdowns, to the close out the Arizona State game and the two to close out the Arizona game, if one of those four is not 7 points, USC is either 1-1 or 0-2 right now. So that was a positive sign. And then the defense, I guess you could say the defense is clutch too. I mean, they finished off the week one win with that stop against Arizona State. And yeah, they blew the lead against Arizona with about a minute and a half left, but they, thwarted the miracle 25-second, like 75-yard drive to close it out. So I guess they got the job done. So those are my highs. I think those are things that I think the receiving excellence will continue moving forward. The clutch part should as well, but again, I don't know how many clutch situations they're going to be in. Clearly, a lot more than I expected.
Yeah, Nathan, I think you're spot on with that. I wouldn't have expected two clutch situations out of the first weeks. I do want to address the chat real quick from FQ Oregon, the real QBU. I don't know if I agree with the real QBU, but I've been wrong before, so please let me know if I'm wrong in chat. Is USC going to be able to keep up with Oregon? God, right now I'm concerned if USC is going to be able to keep up with a lot of other teams besides Oregon. I
Yeah,
don't think Oregon's the one they have to worry about yet. If they can get to that game, fantastic. Right now, it sure as hell doesn't look like they're going to be able to keep up with Oregon. I mean, if their defense can stymie USC like Arizona State and Arizona have been able to do, especially in the first halves of those games, Oregon's offense is going to torch this defense. Oh, it won't even be close. That'll be. Remember what happened last year, Nathan? I do. I was there. November 2nd. That day is drilled into my head, and they destroyed it. So right now, no, they can't keep up with it. I need to see a lot else. I think this Utah game next week is going to be telling. We'll get to that later in the show. But thank you for the call, the follow, FQ Oregon. We also got a follow from Michael Black. So Michael Black, if you're in the chat right now, thank you for the follow. We appreciate that. Make sure to follow us on Twitter so you don't miss another episode. I want to get into my good, and the good from this is the running backs, man. USC has been struggling with running backs in the past couple of years, and a lot of that's been from injury, right? Marquise Stepp went down last year. Carr has been plagued with injuries, and those two guys are doing it this year, man. I love Stephen Carr. I say it every week, man. I like the guy's energy. I think he brings the right type of energy. There's a lot of guys on the sideline or on the field that I see have this energy, and then they just go out there and they don't play well. And it's like, okay, I like that you're dancing on the sidelines and stuff, but like, get in there and play. Like, let's go. Let's do something out there. Whereas Stephen Carr, man, he's got the energy every game. And this guy, I like it. I want to see him break out again. I think he had a great performance. 81 yards. Marquise Stepp had 82 yards. Now, let me tell you something. Marquise Stepp, it takes a lot of people to bring him down, man. It really does. And Vi, I like Vi in the situations that he is. That touchdown he got where we got his, he kept his knee and elbow up, got on his back and stretched that in. Great for him. That is a fantastic run. That's technically, you practice that, man. I like that. That is the mental toughness and like the forethought to say, I got to get this ball in. I can't get my knee down. We got the chat popping off right now. Emil, keep the faith. Things still peak at the right time. Emil, I'm trying to keep the faith right now. And I still do think this team is great, but I got to see something first, man. I really do. And we'll see. We got another chat from Michael Black. Oregon, tied most Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Most top 10 pick QBs got an argument. Michael Black agrees that USC will peak at the right time. Yeah, like I said, we'll get into it later. There's a couple teams on the schedule. I'm going to surprise you guys with who I'm worried about because I don't think anyone else is really worried about this team as much as I am, but we'll get to that later. The rest of the highs, I want to point out a couple other things. They showed up. They did good. Talanoa Hufanga, I love the dude, man. I sat next to him in modern European history last class, and I got to talk to him a lot. Dude, was it History 104 here at USC? Great class. Talanoa and I were just chatting it up all class, talking about the French Revolution and stuff. But that guy is awesome, man. I love him. He's the one really solid spot on this defense that I say we can really rely on him at the safety position. Isaiah Palomar is coming into it. I think he still needs a little bit more to be there, but Isaiah's really starting to get a little bit better. And Drake Jackson, too. I think Drake Jackson is one of the highlights on this defense as well. So Talanoa and Drake Jackson are my two big picks on defense.
Yeah, and then Marlon Tuipulotu as well. I don't really know where this defensive line would be without him and Drake Jackson. But I want to talk about the running backs real quick because they've been good when they've been used. The problem is, and we'll talk about this later, of course, they need to be used more. But I think that the other area where they're sort of complementing the USC offense is in the passing game. And after the Week 1 win against Arizona State, Graham Harrell and Clay Helton both praised Keaton Slovis for not forcing passes. Now, frankly, I don't know what game they were watching because he did that quite a bit in that first game. But the one thing that they got that was spot on was that he was using the check down a lot. And this is usually Vavai, where he doesn't have anything, whether it's because aren't open, the offensive line is just collapsing, which we will talk about that as well because that happens quite a bit. He knows where the running backs are, and they've been decent in the passing game, and they're able to turn these sort of lost plays where it looked like Keaton might get sacked or it looked like there's just nothing there, he might have to throw it away. He's checking it down to Vi, and they're picking up 7-8 yards. So that's been really positive to see. Again, they need to use the running backs on the ground more because that is what. And the offense is looking kind of one-dimensional at this point at times. But the way that they've been used in the passing game, I think, is very encouraging to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to acknowledge a couple of things in the chat. Scott, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate having you here. Emil, should not take away that Arizona played well. They did play well, and it is good for the league overall. Yeah. But Grant Gunnell really surprised me. I didn't think he was going to come out that hard. I did a Q&A with the Daily Wildcat over at University of Arizona, and the battle I was looking forward to most was a quarterback battle. I love when you have two young quarterbacks, Gunnell and Slovis, going up against each other. We didn't know what we were going to see from Gunnell. He played a really good game. I'll give him that, man. He had 286 yards. Yeah, dude, absolutely. 155 rating. He had a higher rating than Keaton. I like that. Seems like perception has gotten worse because of USC struggling. Need USC to win big. Completely agree with that, Michael. We need a big win here. USC needs a big win. You need a statement win to even move up in the polls. I think holding at 20 was the right spot. We'll get to that later. I want to move on to our next question because I feel like we're starting to talk about some of the same things here. The biggest thing for me in this game was why do they keep continuing to underperform? And I think play calling is the big thing. Can I rant for 1 second, Nathan? Can you let me go on here?
Please.
Okay. So for 2 weeks in a row, USC has been, we're going to go aggressive. We're going to get those fourth downs and we're going to do it. Why, when you're tied 2020, do you not take the field goal with how much time was left in that, what was it? Let me look up. 23 seconds left in the third quarter.
Yeah.
Take the field goal. You're running out of shotgun. And you get tackled. It was the same thing that happened against Arizona. You had that edge rush, and bam, it just gets taken down. Oh, it bothers me. You have that there. You're on the 6-yard line. It's a surefire bet. You get the 3 points, you go up by 3, and then you put a little bit more pressure on Arizona. I don't get it. Yeah, you had them pinned deep. They started at their 6. Fine. I'll give them that. But come on, man. We got to do something there. We got to figure this out. Emil says he's not worried. A bad win's a win. It'll all come. And that's why the title of this show is Still Alive, Barely Breathing. They're still alive. They can still go undefeated. They can still go 6-0 and take on that Oregon game. Nathan, what's the big thing for you for the underperforming?
The thing that worries me is that they say you win and lose games in the trenches. And if that's the case, I don't know how USC is 2-0. Because, like I said, Marlon and Drake are without them, this defensive line is just basically nothing, right? And this entire defense as a whole is just basically nothing, but especially the defensive line. They still struggle with finishing plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. There's been way too many missed tackles. I remember very vividly at the beginning, somewhere in the third quarter, like middle of the third quarter, there was a 3rd and 15, might have been toward the end of the third. There was a 3rd and 15 where Grant Gunnell just does one of those little checkdowns to one of the running backs, and he's surrounded by 3 USC defenders, and somehow he jukes out all of them and picks up the first down. That was the kind of play that we saw way too much of last again this year. They've just gotten no pressure whatsoever. And when they do, the middle of the field is just wide open. So the defensive game plan overall is just really confusing to me. I'm not quite sure what it is, frankly. The defense has just looked underprepared and undisciplined at times, but also the offensive line. Elijah Vera Tucker, I'm not talking about you. You've been awesome. I'm more so talking about the center to the right side of the offensive line. It's been basically non-existent, and I think that's why some of those 4th and 1, 4th and 2 conversion attempts just aren't working, because they're trying those edge rushes, but they're not establishing the edge, right? And even when Elijah Vera Tucker does that, there's a gap somewhere, and Arizona defenders were just plugging that gap all day, and they weren't able to make anything out of it. And I think that's also part of why Kedon Slovis kind of struggled that game. And how he didn't get sacked that's a testament to both Kedon and the wide receivers and the running back check down passing game, because he was just being pressured all night. He never really had any time. He didn't get comfortable all game. He didn't get comfortable all game in the Week 1 win against Arizona State. But that really has to change, because USC, we know how good Kedon Slovis can be. We know how good the wide receivers can be. But without an offensive line that gives it time to work, there's basically nothing. And if you can't establish the running game with the offensive line as well, basically nothing as well. So that's part of what's made this offense a little bit too one-dimensional. I mean, they can't really do anything else because they have no time to do anything else. So they're not running the ball enough, and then that doesn't open up the passing game as much as it should, because everybody knows what's coming. They're just doing the drop 8, and USC has nothing to work with there. So if it's true that you win games in the trenches, USC, when they get tested by Utah, by Oregon, by, I don't want to spoil your other team that might threaten USC, but I mean, Colorado looks good. Washington State doesn't look bad this year. They're going to need to clean that up, because without this team, this team will only go as high as Kedon Slovis can go, and Kedon Slovis will only go as high as the offensive line will allow him to go. So that's sort of what worries me. I don't think Kedon Slovis's early issues, whatever they are, whether it's a hand thing, people were speculating about that. I'm not going to pretend like I know what that is. I don't think it's all the offensive line's fault. I think he's made some questionable uncharacteristic decisions that he didn't quite make last year. But it's certainly factoring into that when he basically has no time to work because the puck is just collapsing around him all day.
I want to take a nod to Scott here real quick. And by the way, Scott, we don't have a call in yet. We're working on that. We'll have one soon, hopefully, where you guys can get on the phone and talk with us live on the show. He says he disagrees with your take, and I think he disagrees about Slovis not getting comfortable. That's my bet. And the trenches did get better in the third quarter. I thought it gradually got better, but I think out of game one or out of the first two quarters, I want to see a little bit more there. It did get better, and it gets better towards the end. I think Keaton really did settle in the fourth quarter, the third and fourth quarter. So it got better. I'm not saying that the trenches are completely lost at all. I think the trenches are getting there, but man, the guy's getting a lot of pressure, and thank God Keaton can evade. He didn't even take a sack in that game, right?
Nope.
So that's really impressive for me. But yeah, the drop eight, it looks really like everyone studied BYU's game against USC last year because that's what destroyed them, right? Is that drop eight. So if we got any of the BYU guys, once again, I'm sorry. Nathan and I are sorry for talking bad about BYU. But here's the thing. USC's got to play action or something. And you talked about the zone coverage. Someone in the zone coverage, I'm sorry, who was it? Someone in the chat, Emil, said we need to figure out the zone. Yeah, there was that one play, Jamari Joyner, I think it was. It was went up, he got blocked, and then he went out to the right side. And it took that guy off the zone, and then it was basically a one-on-one with Max Williams and him, and then Max Williams it was not a good route to that tackle at all. He got burned, and then 34-yard touchdown. So that zone coverage worked right there. So that didn't that was a bad. The zone coverage really hurt. Michael, thank you. I'll check out Google Voice. We'll see if we can get that set up for next week's show. I'd love to have you guys on the call. Thank you again for everyone being so active in chat. We love that. Yeah, play calling is really what's hurting me right now. It seems like the linebacker situation is a little iffy too. It seems like we always leave something up the middle. I feel like our middle game is just not that great right now.
I mean, Grant Cannell is not a dual threat quarterback. I mean, he seemed like one yesterday, but he's a great passer. But he had something like 19 rushing yards in 8 games last year. I mean, maybe he totally revamped his game in the offseason, but the fact that USC could have there were an additional 4 to 5 times where USC could have brought him down, and then he just shot right up the middle where there were no. I mean, like you said, the middle of the field was just wide open, and he would pick up these 10, 11 scrambles for first downs that just over and over and over again. And we talk a lot about how USC struggles with mobile quarterbacks. Apparently, it's just they struggle with quarterbacks who can use their legs at all, because Grant Cannell is not a particularly mobile quarterback, but if you have some competence in the scrambling game, you're going to exploit this defense because the linebackers are just not getting the job, or the defensive scheme, whatever it is, it's just not getting the job done. And that's going to have to change when they go up against Dorian Thompson-Robinson and those kinds of guys who can really use their legs, because they're just going to exploit them all game. We saw Jaden Daniels in week 1 did that all game. He would pick up 10, 11, 19, 20-yard runs, and USC just had no answer for that. So definitely need to get that cleared up.
Yeah, I'm looking for that. Scott in chat, 2-0. We are 2-0. USC is 2-0, and that's all you can ask for at this point, right? I mean, I would like to see a lot better, like you said. I think this Utah game is going to be a lot of fun. Colorado is also going to be a really interesting game. The defense is Scott says the defense is better. Period. I mean, it was hard to go down from where we were last year. That was a rough time. You look at that Iowa game. Oof.
Yeah, how big is that improvement? This is one of the things that I was worried about this year, is that the defense was not going to get worse. It wasn't even going to stay the same because Clancy Pendergast was just not it. But how much better this year? At 30 points to Arizona. I mean, look, Arizona's offense is fine. They shouldn't have allowed 30 points that game. They probably shouldn't have allowed 27 points to Arizona State, right? Which is also a good offense. But come on, they were just, I mean, the only reason they didn't score more than that is because they didn't have the ball for the last 5 minutes, because USC did twice and then the onside kick, whatever. So, again, the defense is better, of course. Almost every aspect of the defense is better. But how much? And it needed to be a lot better in order for USC to make a real difference this year. And I just haven't seen that yet.
I want to move into our last question because Michael's spoiling my hot take in the chat, man. He's relentless about it. He keeps spoiling it. So we're going to move on to our last topic. Where does USC stand in the national picture? What does this go? I'm saying right now, the hardest game for USC on the schedule is not, aside from Oregon, if they get to that point, right, is not Utah. It is UCLA. a running quarterback, DTR. They looked good against Cal today. It all hinges on our power run. Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see more running. I don't know. With this drop 8 that everyone keeps playing against us, man. I want to see some more running game, play action there. You talk something, Michael. Now you got me. It's good. I want you in chat. I want you spoiling my hot takes. But where does they stand in the picture? They held at 20 this week. I said that. I am surprised Northwestern moved above them when I saw that. Who was it that lost?
Yeah,
Who was it 19 that lost?
SMU. They lost to Tulsa.
I thought USC was going to move up, and then Northwestern was going to take that 20 spot. Either way, I don't really care. The difference isn't that big. USC needs to do a lot more in order to move up in those rankings, and you need a lot of people above them to lose too. But golly, stick at 20 again. At least they're not going down. That's a good thing. And Utah's at 28 right now too. They're just outside the 25, and they haven't even played a game yet. So great thing for USC.
This is the thing that I've been talking about for the last 2 months, it seems like, which is that this season, and whether they have a stake for the college football playoff at all, I know some people are going to make fun of me for even using that term with USC in the same sentence.
1%.
That should be the team's goal. That should be the team's goal. Whatever. It's not just going to come down to beating Oregon, beating Utah, beating Arizona State, because they have to do that anyway, right? It's going to come down to making statements against Arizona, against Washington State, against UCLA, against Colorado, although we've already talked about how the last 3 of those teams could actually put up a fight against SC. USC can't allow that to happen because it's going to come down when the season's over. It's going to come down, if it comes down to this at all, if SC makes it undefeated, they are Pac-12 champions at 7-0. It's going to come down to comparing an undefeated SC with undefeated, whether it's Ohio State, Indiana, I don't know what's going to happen in the Big Ten, with a one-loss, maybe Notre Dame, Clemson, BYU is probably going to be undefeated. Cincinnati is going to be undefeated as well. So it's going to come down to not just how many games did they lose and how many games did they win, but how did they get there? And so far, USC, I'm not convinced. I don't know if you're convinced, but the AP voters sure aren't convinced, and I don't blame them for not being convinced. I mean, they're 2-0. They started the season ranked number 20, and where are they at right now? Number 20. They had a chance to make a statement against Arizona State, who's a quality opponent. They won by 1 point. Okay, give them a pass week 1, as I said. But these games against Arizona, I was saying before this game that any outcome in which USC doesn't cover the spread, which I believe was 14-5, was a bad outcome for this team because these are the games that they have to make a statement. And right now, a third of the regular season's gone. Now they have Utah, Colorado, UCLA, Washington State to make the sort of statement that they failed to make in the first 2 weeks. And it's going to come down to that. It's going to come down to not just what their record is, whether they're conference champions, but how they got there. And so far, the road that they've taken to get there, if they get there in the first place, I'm not sold.
Yeah, Scott, I think you're right on with the it comes down to power running mixed with the air raid. I want to see a little bit more running out of this team. I think it's a very predictable offense right now. So I would love to see that. Scott, you are all in on the defense, and I love that for you. I'm glad you're confident in it. I hope I can see that in the coming weeks. But what I will say is Northwestern is only 1 vote ahead of USC in the poll. And remember, the AP poll doesn't really matter when it comes down to it. If we're talking about the CFP, obviously it's a great proxy for that. But Jesus. I don't know. I'm worried. And then Rydell's in the chat saying college football stands. Yeah, I'm a college football stan. You know why? I'm from Michigan. The only other football I got right now is the Detroit Lions, and they won today, but they're not doing too well. So yeah, I'm a USC fan now, and I got Michigan in my back pocket too. So I got to go with USC right now. God, I'm gonna go back and watch the third quarter performance. I'm gonna right after the show. I'm gonna go watch it. I'm gonna watch every play. And I want you to. What are your odds? What are your odds for USC? I saw 4.8%. I saw 1% from ESPN. What are your odds that USC make the college football playoffs?
I mean, okay, this is the way I see it, right? If you have Clemson beat Notre Dame in the ACC championship game, which I think probably happens, unless they blow them out of the water, they're probably both in because Clemson is Clemson and they have 1 loss and it was to a very good team. And then the Irish will have 1 loss as well, and the only loss would to be a team that they already beat earlier in the season. So they're probably both in there. Alabama probably goes undefeated and wins the SEC there, and of course, Ohio State probably goes undefeated and wins the Big Ten. So unless one of those things doesn't happen, there are going to be no spots to take. And I can bet you right now, I don't know what's going to happen if it comes down to, SC versus I don't know, Texas A&M, Florida, BYU, Cincinnati, Indiana, whoever. But if it comes down to SC versus any of those 4 teams and neither of them has multiple losses, USC is not getting in. I mean, if Alabama and Ohio State don't lose, and Notre Dame are both 1-1, so something's got to happen there for a spot to open up. But beyond that, I mean, I think USC, an undefeated SC, would match up pretty well against teams like Indiana, BYU. It just depends. They have to be more convincing, and I think they obviously have to run the table. Of course, if they lose one game, they're done. Obviously,
I mean, you also have the risk of losing a game just to COVID, right? I mean, we've seen 4 games already in 2 weeks, and granted, one got rescheduled, right? But I mean, if you end up going 6-0 with the Pac-12 championship, like that hurts right there too, right? I want to ask you, chat, while you go on this. I want Scott, Emil, Michael. What do you think the chances are? Michael said 0.05% from what he's seen. Scott and Emil, what do you think the chances are making the CFP are? Nathan, continue. Go on.
Yeah, so I mean, I could see USC running the table. I think that they beat Utah. I think they'd probably beat UCLA, Washington State, and Colorado. Do they win all of those games? Obviously, it's a little more murky. And then I think they have a decent shot against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game if they can clear up some of these, play calling mistakes. The offensive line needs to get a whole lot better because we saw in the Oregon game last year, Keaton Slovis was getting pressured all game, getting hit all game, and that can't happen again for USC to stand any chance. I think they lost by like 24 points last year. But if they can find a way to get that done, and I think that a lot of those adjustments will be made, they have a decent chance to run the table. They're going to need some help, but it's not. I mean, it wouldn't be the most. Stranger things have happened, I guess, right? I would still put it below 5%. I would probably put it in the 1 to 3%, range. But I don't think it's impossible. I think obviously if they lost against Arizona or Arizona State, it'd be over. But the fact that they won, the fact that they're alive, and the fact that I think their schedule, if they're 7-0, is going to look pretty good compared to some of the other teams that might be undefeated or have one loss as well, assuming that there's a spot open, they have a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think,
but they have to be convincing.
They have to. I mean, if there's ever a week to do it, Pac-12 after dark in Salt Lake, Mile High. Well, because the last time USC went to Salt Lake City, I was there in 2018. That was not a fun game for USC. That was a very bad game. That was I remember I was talking to T. Martin, offensive coordinator back at the time, and he's like, "What went wrong?" Like, they kept running cover 2, and someone, I can't remember what media member, maybe Ryan Abraham of Trojans.com, was like, "Well, why didn't you switch it up?" He goes, "Yeah, we just kept running it." I'm like, "What? You just kept running it? What?"
Yeah.
Okay. So at least that part's changed. I see a little bit more adaptation on the offense, and granted, we're not trying to shove a square block into a round hole anymore. God, we have to be balanced. Absolutely. I'm not sold on this air raid. Granted, I mean, it's not a full air raid. This isn't a Mike Leach air raid. It never was. It never will be. I don't think it can be. I think this is just a completely different team, and we have that. Yeah, Utah's dealing with COVID cases. Let's hope they can figure it out. And thank God this game is in Salt Lake City, because if it was in LA, I don't think LA County would let this happen. Yeah. Faith saying Oregon's going to rock them if they get to the Pac-12 championship. They got to show me something.
I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't be surprised if Oregon rocks them in the Pac-12 championship. I mean, if they played right now, Oregon would rock them. Like, there's just no question about that. No. But I mean, I want to briefly about what you were talking about with the offense being unimaginative, one-dimensional, and that was one of the things that I was worried about this year, because Graham Harrell would constantly talk about how this offense is not going to focus on tricking teams. They're just going to focus on what they do well, which is obviously passing the ball, which is great. You should play to your strengths, but that can't be the only aspect of your offense. The reason why the passing game couldn't open up until late yesterday, like the third quarter, when the offensive line, started creating some semblance of protection, and the passing game opened up a little bit. That was only because, it didn't open up until then because the running game wasn't established, because they wouldn't use the running game, right? And as soon as Keaton Slovis hit that 46-yarder to Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think one of the more important plays of the game, the running game opened up. From there, the passing game opened up, and you had this feedback loop that actually made it kind of work. So USC needs more of that. I need to see that running passing attack being more balanced moving forward.
Yeah, I want to see that. I think the O-line, the right side of it a lot, I think we really need to get a little bit more consistent. Chat's still popping up, but we're running out of time. We're at 3:30. The end of our show is upon us. Thank you, everyone. Scott, Michael, Emil, Faith, everyone for getting in chat. We appreciate that, Jacob. We love having you guys here. We love this is a good show. We're working on that call-in number. I want to get you guys on the show. I want to get you guys talking with us. But thank you for tuning in to another episode of Trojan Dash here on Dash Sports TV. As always, you can find us on social at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, you name it. We're on it at Dash Sports TV. We're partnered with sportspack12.com. We're writing columns for them. Nathan writes some good stuff there every week, so go check out his stuff. You can follow him on Twitter at sportspack12. You can find us on the web at dashsports.tv. I don't know if you saw this, Nathan. We got a refreshed website. It looks a lot different now. Homepage looks great. So once again, thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of Trojan Dash. USC's got Utah next week. We'll be back with a big one after that. Always watch our crossover shows. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Trojan Dash. I'm Sam Arslanian for Nathan Ackerman. We'll see you next week.